So we are in the Gospel of Matthew, and it is what is the date? I can't even remember. The date is what, the 16th of December. Well, and we haven't really even haven't done anything Christmassy, which is neither here nor there. But I did want to just plant the thought. When we celebrate Christmas, what we are celebrating is Emmanuel, God with us, the with us God. He's the only with us God. That is a huge distinction, a differentiator between Yahweh and all the other gods. They weren't with their people. They didn't condescend to come down and take on flesh and dwell among them. Also, they couldn't, but it's who our God is, that he comes and sits down with us. He gets down in the weeds, sits down and teaches and instructs and has such patience and love. And that should not surprise us, coming from the King of Kings, who was born in a smelly barn. Everything about, and I will advise again that you watch the Nativity. It's easy to find. You can rent it on YouTube Movies or Prime for like $3. Everything about that movie, the Nativity, and everything that goes on there, it just shows all the stuff of this world. He eschewed, he disdained it. He none of it mattered. He wasn't born of royalty. He wasn't born in a palace. His birth was announced. He was born to a common woman who was nobody, and was raised by a common man who was a carpenter. And his birth was announced. God could have sent those angels, that heavenly host, to anyone, and he sent them to the shepherds, who were the ultimate example of nobody. But there are no nobodies, and this is the big thing. There are no nobodies with him. There is no one who has more value or less value based on their status and standing in this world. And so here, in what we're going to complete tonight in the Sermon on the Mount, we have God who has condescended to come and be with us and teach us how we walk in the righteousness that he's giving us for free. There is no earning it. It's all free. Just like he announced to the shepherds, for unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. There was no price to be paid. It was free. It was good news of great joy that shall be to all people. So that's who's teaching us. That is who cares about us, and everything about his birth shows that he cares about us. So as he has just talked about, he's just talked about the narrow way, and the sermon really builds to a crescendo in talking about big picture stuff. He's gotten down into details on all kinds of things about the practical significance and meaning of walking in the righteousness that he gives us for free as a gift. He's going through all kinds of practical things about that, how to view the world, how to understand the world, what matters, what doesn't, how to view sustenance and money and all of that stuff. And now he's going big picture here at the end, and by big picture, I mean the eternal picture. The eternal picture, if the lens with which we focus on things in this world isn't also focused on eternity, isn't also focused on the Eden where God is with us. See, Jesus being here, it's a little bit of Eden. It was a whole lot of Eden, right? Everybody knew he was different. We're going to see that. He was Eden come down to us, and he is restoring Eden for us. And that's off in the future for us in this timeline thing that we're in. So if the way we look at this world and understand this world and view this world isn't focused not only on what's going on here, but also where we're going and how this relates to that for us and the others we come into contact with who are in our lives, then we're looking at it the wrong way. So here at the end of this sermon, he's going macro. He's been micro, down in details. He's getting to the big stuff, big stuff. The narrow gate and hard is the way that leads to salvation, and few are those who find it. And you know that. Look at your day. Look at who you saw. Look at what's going on in the world, what you encounter. Most people look right at it and they think they don't want it. And we can go on about that forever. Or they misunderstand it, whatever it might be. So he's talked about it's a narrow path. It's a narrow path. And forget the headings. He didn't put those in there. And now he's giving a warning. He's talking about the narrow path, few are those who find it. Is it any wonder that he goes right to false prophets? Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. I've been around a wolf. Thankfully, it wasn't ravenous. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits. How do you know it's a false prophet? You're going to recognize them by their fruits. And here we see Jesus, the master teacher, who took stuff they knew, who took stuff that they understood. I happen to have, in my youth been dumb enough to encounter a wolf and go in a cage with it. That was a kind of an artificial, weird setting. But I came away from that knowing that a wolf is nothing like a dog. They're big. They're scary. Their teeth have a sharp edge on the back of their canines. It's like a razor blade. It's freaky. It's weird. I can't imagine being around ravenous wolves. You can read some Jack London stories where he talks about that up in Alaska and Canada. Ravenous wolves. They're big and they're scary and they're going to destroy stuff and they just eat it up and consume it, crunch the bones, right? That's what he's, and the people of Jesus' day, they knew what wolves were. The shepherds had to contend with wolves, lions, bears, but he uses wolves here because they're known for how ferocious and cunning and smart they are. That's what he is using as the picture of a false prophet. A false prophet. What's a false prophet? It's someone who would lead blood-bought souls, because that's what they are, who would lead blood-bought souls to damnation for profit's sake. How sick is that? For money. Because to them, this world is all there is. We can go on and into that. But how do you know it's a ravenous wolf? More practical stuff. Where does he go? All of these people grew their own food. Almost all of these people, to some level or another, grew their own food, prepared their own food, produced their own food. So he's just talking to them about the stuff they knew and they understood. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Heck no. You're not going to go out and look for figs on thistles. Thistles are all pointy, spiky thorn bushes. And there in the Middle East, there were some thorn bushes that had great big long thorns. It'd be absurd to go look for grapes there or figs from thistles. So every healthy tree bears good fruit. If you want to know if the prophet is true, look at what he produces. Look at what he produces. Does he have $48 million in the bank? Or Is he focused on winning souls? Winning souls. Is he like John the Baptist? Now, I'm not saying you got to be a pauper to be a preacher, or a teacher, but is he about being a servant? Because the great ones are all servants. That's what they're there for. They teach because they can't not teach. Paul says he's compelled to preach the gospel because he can't not do it, right? So a healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit. If it's a true teacher, the fruit that they produce is going to be faithful, Savior-loving souls. Nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. It just doesn't happen. These were things that they understood, and we can understand. Very simple pictures. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Fire is always a picture of judgment and damnation. So these false prophets, and they have their day. They got their TV shows. They've got their palaces. And it's not always huge big timers either. Don't think that they're the only ones, but they are these guys over here. Look at the picture. A wolf in sheep's clothing. A sheep is harmless. A sheep is cuddly, but they're intentionally being deceitful. Ezekiel 22:7. And here he's talking about Israel and what a mess she was. Her princes in her midst are like wolves tearing the prey, shedding blood, destroying lives to get dishonest gain. Acts 20:29, I know that after my departure, this is Paul talking to the church at Ephesus, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. Wolves have no mercy. There's no compassion. They don't feel sorry for the sheep. They'll just tear them up and destroy them. And all this stuff, why is Jesus saying this? Watch out. Pay attention to who you listen to. And how do you check them out? You measure it against the word. That means you need to be in the word. Paul called the Christians at Berea noble. They were more noble because daily they searched the scriptures to see if these things were so. The stuff Paul told them, they'd go open up the Old Testament and say, wow, that is what it says. They were using the word to gauge him. Okay, we will go on. We could look at more examples, but I want to make sure we get through everything. So again, this part here, I never knew you. Jesus didn't put that there. This next part comes, it's connected to what went ahead. There are false, here, shocker. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? There are false teachers in the church. There are those who pretend to be believers who aren't, who act like they're doing the Lord's work and they're doing it for their own power. And sometimes it's just power. You know, petty politics and congregations, it's just about the power. It's just about the power. So this addresses everyone, not just the prophets, the people who put themselves out there as spiritual leaders, but all of us. Not everyone who says to me, because you just talked about throwing the false prophets in the fire, right? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, like they're calling on him, right, will enter the kingdom of heaven. But the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. We'll come back to that. On that day, what day? The end day, the last day, the great and terrible day, day of wrath, O day of mourning. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. What a horrible thing that must be to hear. In final judgment, emphasis on final, and it's judgment, to hear, depart from me, I never knew you, you workers of lawlessness. So there can be those who are doing mighty works in Jesus' name, who are laboring, toiling, whatever, who are workers of lawlessness. Back to the beginning, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Is not just, hey, oh, I want to be with you. I want to be saved. I want to be okay, whatever. Calling on the name of the Lord and operating under his name doesn't make you his. What makes you his? But the one who does, lives, walks, carries out the will of my Father who is in heaven. What did Jesus pray in the Garden of Gethsemane when the disciples fell asleep and he went off by himself to pray? What did he pray? Father, if this cup can be taken from me, please do it, but not my will, but thine be done. Faith is humble obedience, willing obedience to follow and walk in the path that the Lord lays out. If I'm, air quotes, serving the Lord for my glory, and it's easy to fall in that rut. It's easy to fall in that rut. If I'm serving the Lord for my glory, if I'm serving the Lord so that people tell me how wonderful I am, if that's what my focus is, if that's where my heart is, and it's not about doing the will of my Father who is in heaven, because if I'm doing the will of him, I'm going to look like him, not physically, but I'm going to look like him in what I do, in who I care for, in what matters to me, in how I prioritize things in my service, right? In my life of faith, because this isn't just about prophets and teachers. What am I following him? Am I living his will? Is that my goal each day when I get up in the morning? Lord, thy will be done. That's the big thing. And doing that, you don't have to worry about hearing, depart from me, I never knew you. You'll hear, come, good and faithful servant, enter into the rest prepared for you, the kingdom prepared for you by my Father since the foundation of the world. Okay. Talked about it building, right? He's talking about watching out for the false prophets. He's talked about all these things that matter on the micro level, on the macro level, in living the righteousness he has given us. And this section with which you are very familiar is how he ends the Sermon on the Mount. Why? It's not just here because he got tired. It's not just here because, he needed a drink some of my fruit, and his voice was tired, and he needed to stop. He ended it here because this pulls everything together. All of the threads of the examples of how you live your faith, how you think about things, how you view money, how you view what's rich and what's poor, all of that. All of that comes together and is pulled together in this example that he gives here at the end. Everyone then, see, he's summarizing, he's pulling it together. And as he pulls those threads together, this picture appears. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them, hear and do, humble obedience, hear, do, that is obedience. Because I can hear and not do. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, puts them into action, just tries to be faithful in walking them out. And we know we're never going to do it perfectly. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and it does. And the floods came, and they certainly do. And the winds blew and beat on that house. Stuff happens. Life gets hard. But it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. Such a simple picture. All these people understood that. Most of these people built their own houses, and they helped their dad, at the very least, add on to the house, because that's where they were going to live with their wife when they got married and brought her into the family, right? They knew how to make a foundation, how to do it the right way. You do it on rock, because if you don't, when the floods come, it's, it's like the three little pigs, right? That's where they got the idea for the picture, for that story. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them, and you know what I want to do? I want to go look and see, let's see, how it goes here. Here, words of mine. Yeah, it's just do. Everyone who does not do them, doesn't operate accordingly in faithful obedience, is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And we've all built sandcastles, right? And it does not matter what materials you put on that sand, because eventually that sand is going to shift. And when water comes, it's certainly going to go. When wind comes, it's going to go. And the rain fell, because it does. And the floods came, because they always do. And the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. Why does he say that at the end? And great was the fall of it. He's not talking about the loud crash that happened when it fell. But if you think about that house being someone's life, and not just their life here, but their life eternally. If you can build with the most beautiful stuff, and how often does that happen? All the stuff of this world and none of the stuff that matters, right? When that falls apart on that last great day, whenever that day might be. My mom's day was a few weeks ago. Jonathan's was back in July. Whenever my time here ends, that's the great day for me. That's the great day for me. If in the end, after all of my living and all of my doing, say I'm here 90 years and I lose my soul, damnation is the result. That's a great fall. That's a great fall. It's a horrible and sad thing. And notice how Jesus, whenever he's teaching things like this, it's like he's pleading with us. Think about it. Think about it. I'll give it to you a bunch of different ways, because this really matters. It's easy to get led astray, and don't think it can't happen to you. I'll never forget, and some of you probably heard this story, but I'll tell it again, because that's what I like to do. This is back when I was in seminary, and a big time TV preacher, if you were alive at the time, you would have known him, Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell, big time TV preacher, had fallen. He fell. Found out he was visiting prostitutes and all this stuff. And of course, we're a bunch of young guys studying to be pastors, and we knew pretty much everything, which was a wonderful time in my life when I knew everything. And we were walking back from break, and I asked this one guy, and he was a little bit older, and he was just one of these real thoughtful kind of guys. So I was just kind of like, yeah, what do you think about Jerry Falwell? And he got this picture in my mind. I remember it so clearly. He was walking down the stairs, and he kind of turned his head to the side, and he said, well, I think that, what Paul says about let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall is what comes to mind. And I knew right then that guy was way ahead of me as far as spiritual maturity, because that's the way we should think. It can happen to you. Solomon ended up with 500 wives and 500 concubines, worshiping false gods. Hopefully he came back at the end, and he was the wisest man who ever lived. It can happen to you. Be careful. Work out your own salvation, with fear and trembling, Paul says. Stay in the word. Pursue it. Let Jesus talk to you. Hear his urgings and his pleadings. Can you imagine what it was like to hear him? I've heard some impressive speakers, not the ones who are just flowery and powerful, but just gifted speakers. Some people are just very gifted in how they communicate and the way they pull an audience in. But can you imagine what it was like to hear Jesus? I can't. I will get to in eternity. But what an amazing thing. And that is the reaction that the crowd had. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as one of their scribes. He taught with authority. He taught with authority. And it says they were astonished. That word is only used 13 times in the New Testament. 12 of those times are in the Gospels. And it's always talking about people's reaction to Jesus and what he said and what he did. And the word literally means to have your senses struck out of you, to strike somebody out of their senses. Just like, holy cow, blown away is what it means. It's more powerful than the English word astonished. I mean, that's the best way to translate it. But they had their senses knocked out of them. They were blown away by him because he had authority. The scribes could talk and teach, but Jesus had authority. And part of that authority, I believe, has to be the passion with which he spoke. And that's why I like the movie, The Gospel of John. That's just the Gospel of John in its entirety. And the guy from Lost plays Jesus, and he plays the best Jesus I've ever seen, because I hate all the wimpy, mealy-mouthed Jesuses. These soft-spoken, kindly, wimpy, soy boy Jesuses that they use. I don't think that's the way he was at all. When he was saying, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, he was wailing on them. He was just, woe to you. He was ripping on them. And here, where he was teaching his sheep, he spoke with passion and authority because he wanted them to hear him, and because he was who he was. We can't.
What's that movie again, Dad?
The Gospel of John.
Gospel of John.
You can find it. You can find it on your YouVersion Bible app. If you go into the videos there, it's there. And that's the best copy of it because it's clean. It's on YouTube as
sweet.
well. But on the YouVersion Bible app, and it might be broken up in pieces, but it'll go through the whole thing. But I think he does a wonderful job of, and the whole thing does, of the setting of things. But it when it's narration, it's what's in the Gospel of John, and then it's Jesus speaking, or John the Baptist. I think it's all very well cast, and that guy, is it Simon from Lost, plays a great Jesus. He plays a great Jesus. But he spoke with authority, because every time I think about Jesus, I get it wrong, because I focus on either him being a man or him being God, Yahweh. And my brain kind of focuses on one or the other, but he was both. Can you imagine the authority coming out of him? The one who said, take off your sandals at the burning bush, because this is holy ground. The one who said to Pharaoh, told Moses to tell Pharaoh, let my people go. My firstborn son, Israel. The power that had to
and I have my people back.
Yes. Oh, would you please let him go? Mom and I have been watching all this stuff about Egypt and just the amazing structures and what it must have looked like. And I said the other day, might have been last night as we were watching, I said to Mom, I said, no wonder these pharaohs said to Yahweh, who are you that I should listen to you? They had it going on by worldly standards. It was just amazing what all they had done. Okay, we're going to stop there because that is 8:30, and we managed to finish up the sermon on the Mount, I strongly recommend go back and listen to it. Only takes 10 minutes to listen to the whole Sermon on the Mount, maybe 15. And think about that theme. It's Jesus teaching us how to live in the righteousness, to walk out the righteousness that he has given us by faith, in faith.
That concludes our broadcast for today. We publish our videos on YouTube, BitChute, and Brighteon. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a like or a thumbs up. We invite you to subscribe so you can continue to receive our content. Also, please consider sharing this video with others. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below. This is Matthias 76, and together we will continue to decode the deception.